Hi, this is Munson with Munson Music, and welcome to Talking with the Guitar. And we're going to talk about how you can use the guitar to kind of measure off guitar theory and kind of get used to what sounds are, so that you can eventually just internalize them enough to just be able to get whatever sound you want at will. So the idea here is we're going to take one string and kind of figure out all the guitar theory that you can possibly think of with one string, because everything comes down to measures of distance. So for instance, just to go over the E string, we're just going to use like just the high E string for this lesson. And if you know the E string really well, then it'll be really easy to divide up scales and divide up chords and a lot of different things. So just to go over the notes on the E string, something called a chromatic scale. And what a chromatic scale is a scale built out of half steps, which is the distance of one fret. So if you went from open to first fret, that's the distance of one fret, or first to second, or second to third, or third to fourth, or fourth to fifth, or fifth to sixth, or sixth to seventh, and just kind of worked up every single note. Those would be notes kind of ordered in something called half steps. And the scale that's made up of half steps is something called a chromatic scale. And chroma means color, and scale kind of means ladder or to measure, from the Latin scala. So if we kind of go up through all the notes in music, then it's something called a chromatic scale. So it's basically playing all the different colors that we have to play with on our musical palette. So if we play through up all those, there's some things called sharps and there's some things called flats. And what a sharp is if that's an F note and you go over one fret, we call that F sharp. And if that's a G on third fret, if you go up one fret, that's called a G sharp. And if that's an A on fifth fret and you go up one fret, that's called an A sharp. So it's a sharp is just one note higher on the guitar. So if we had a C on 8th fret and you went up one fret, that would be a C sharp note. And if you have a D on 10 and you go to 11th fret, that's something called D sharp. So all the way up, we got E and F sharp and G sharp and A sharp and D, and B magically goes to C, just like E magically goes to F. And then we have a C sharp, a D sharp, and a E. And then there's some other things in music called flats, and what a flat is if you go one fret lower. So if we have an E note on 12th fret and we go down to 11th fret, we could call that E flat. So if there's a D on 10th fret and we go down one, we could call that D flat. And then we got C, and then we got a B, and then we got a B flat, and then we got an A, and then an A flat, and then a G, and then a G flat, and then we got an F, and then we're back to E. So those are all the colors that we have in the whole musical palette is E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. Or, if you're thinking flats, E flat, D flat, C, B flat, A flat, G flat, F, and E. And that's a scale made up of something called half steps, which is that distance of kind of one fret. But if we were thinking about that distance in a scale, when you're thinking about scales, a lot of times the scale that gets the note name of the scale is something called the tonic note. So what we're actually doing is kind of playing an E chromatic scale, and we can actually think about measures of distance in relationship to that E note. So when you go over to first fret on the E string, that's something called a flat 2 of a scale. And the reason why it's called a flat 2 is because we measure off scales according to something called a major scale. And a major scale is actually kind of a collection of half steps, which is when you don't skip any notes, and whole steps. And what a whole step is if you kind of skip over a fret. So we went from open E to second fret on the E. That's something called a second or a whole step. And we could there's actually even a scale made up of nothing but whole steps called the whole tone scale. And if you did the open E and it went to second fret on the E, that would be a whole step. And if you go from second fret on the high E to fourth fret on the high E, that's a whole step. And if you go from fourth fret on the high E to sixth fret on the high E, that's a whole step. And if you go from sixth fret to 8th fret, that's a whole step. And if you go from 8th to 10th fret, that's called a whole step. And from 10 to 12 is a whole step. So actually that has a name called the whole tone scale. And the notes that we're actually playing when we do a whole tone scale, we're playing E and F sharp and G sharp, and then we're playing an A sharp and a C and a D, and then we're back to an E. Depending on which way you're kind of thinking about sharps or flats, because we could be thinking of that as a B flat, we could think of that as an A flat, and that as a G flat. But so it has something called a whole tone scale. What a major scale is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do that you've heard your entire life. And so to make a major scale out of whole steps and half steps, we do 2 whole steps and then a half step, and then we do 3 whole steps, and then we do another half step. So we start with the open E, and then we go to 2nd fret, which is a whole step, to F sharp, and then we go to 4th fret, which is a whole step, to G sharp. But then instead of doing another whole step like whole tone scale, we go to the 5th fret on the high E, which is an A note, and then we do another, well, so it's got a half step there. So we got whole step, half step. And then from the A note, then we're going to be going over a whole step to B, and then we do another whole step from B to C sharp, and then we do another whole step from C sharp to D sharp, and then at the end we do a half step from the D sharp to the E note. So we kind of got E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, which are the notes that make an E major scale. And you could even play that down too. You got E, D sharp, C sharp, B, A, G sharp, F sharp, E are the actual notes that we're playing. But a lot of times when you're trying to get used to talking with the guitar, it's more important to kind of think measures of distance. So instead of thinking of that as kind of the notes, actually, it can be really useful to think about them as numbers. So we took the open E and thought of that as number 1, or the tonic note, or sometimes we'll call that the root note if you're thinking of it as a chord idea. And we're going to go into 2nd fret for the 2nd of the scale. We're going to go to 4th fret for the 3rd of the scale. We're going to go to 5th fret for the 4th of the scale. We're going to go to 7th fret for the 5th of the scale. We're going to go to 9th fret for the 6th of the scale, and then we're going to go to 11th fret for the 7th of the scale. And when you get back to 12th fret, you're actually on the name of the string, so that's back to the root, or back to number 1. So it can be really useful to think of the scale that way. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, even though those aren't the frets we're actually playing. So you're going from the open to 2nd fret to 4th fret to 5th fret to 7th fret to 9th fret to 11th fret to 12th fret, but you're thinking about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, so that you have a measure of distance, which can be really cool. So other measures of distance, all these notes that we're skipping over, can be thought of as flat versions of those numbers. So we got the open E, but if we went to 1st fret on the E, like chromatic scale, we could call that a flat 2, because it's like taking the 2nd fret and going down 1 fret to kind of flat it. So if we tried thinking about the whole string that way, like chromatic scale that way, in terms of regular numbers and flat numbers, this could be very useful for scale construction. So you got open, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7, 1, 1, 7, flat 7, 6, flat 6, 5, flat 5, 4, 3, flat 3, 2, 1, open E. Now one other interesting thing, just to kind of, while we're thinking of numbers, is some of these, actually when they're added to chords, get called other things, because chords are built in something called thirds, where if you have a root note for a chord and you count up 3 on your finger, 1, 2, 3, the 3rd is what normally gets added to build a chord. And then if you keep going 4, 5, the 5th is what normally gets kind of added to a chord too. And then after the 5th, then we go 5, 6, 7. So we add a 7th to a chord. And if you're building crazy chords, then you go up another couple and you've got 1, 2, but we could call it the 9th. So all the 2s you could think of as 9s if you wanted to. And then from 9 we have 9, skip 10 for 11, right? So we could have an 11th added to a chord, or 11, 12, 13th, which would actually be kind of the 6th. So this is kind of weird, but you could think about those numbers in relationship to chords, and then you would have, the open would be root, and then you'd have a flat 9, and then a 9, instead of a flat 2, you think of it as a 9. And then you have a flat 3, and then a 3rd, because that's what you would add to the scale. And then the 4 could be an 11 if you were thinking about it as a chord, and then you got the flat 5, or the sharp 11, depending on which way you want to look at it. And then we have a 5, and then we have a flat 6, which would also be a sharp 5, so some of these you can think of different ways. And then we have a 6, and then or which could also be a 13, and then we've got the flat 7, and then we got the 7, and then we're back to root. So that may be a little weird, but you could actually think about it in relationship to a chord too. So we got root, flat 9, 9, flat 3, 3, 4, sharp 4, flat 5, 5, sharp 5 or flat 6, flat 6, flat 7, 7, 1. So that might be something else to kind of play around with. But the idea of talking with the guitar is getting used to what sounds are there and then kind of being able to assimilate them, so that when you're listening to something, you can put a number value on what you're hearing. So the whole idea of talking with the guitar is giving you a name for things you've been listening to your entire life. So for instance, if you started on the open E and kind of went to 2nd fret on the high E, and then 3rd or 4th fret on the high E, then if we played the open again, that'll almost be the beginning of Farajaka, right? So we could go open 2, 4, open, open 2, 4, open. But if we thought of that in relationship to our scale numbers, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. And then if we were going to go over the next part, it'd kind of start on the 3, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. So I'm thinking of the scale numbers, and that's what can be really useful in kind of giving you a name for things that you're hearing. So from the beginning, we got 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, or 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. And if you kept that going, then you'd have 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, open, root, 5, 6, 5, 7, 4, 3, 1. And then actually if we were going to throw in the B string, you'd have an open, 5th, open, open, 5th, open. So that may be kind of cool to kind of play around with trying to pick out melodies that you know. And one cool thing about trying to do this on the E string is you could always add in the bass E string to what you're doing too, as kind of a reference, because that's another note with the name E. So all of these notes are actually in relationship to the high E and the low E the same way, or at least the way we're trying to kind of simplify it. So you could even throw in that note to play Farajaka. So you got the open, and I'm going to kind of, I'll call it the frets one time. So you got open, 2, 4, open, open, 2, 4, open, 4, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 7, 9, 7, 5, 4, open, 7, 9, 7, 5, 4, open, open, 7, open, open, 7, open. But then the way you really want to think about it is in relationship to the scale. So you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 1, 7, 1, or 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 1. So that might be something else to kind of play around with. And actually there are a bunch of different scales. By changing or flatting a few of these notes, actually you can create all kinds of scales, and some of them have all kinds of different names. So right now we're playing around in something called a major scale. But what can also be kind of cool is a little bit brighter sound than that is something called Lydian, which is a mode of major scale. And what Lydian is where you just sharp all the 4s. So if we were going to play a Lydian on one string, we'd have the 1, and then 2, and then we got the 3rd of the scale. But then when we get to 4, instead of going to 5th fret for the A note, you could go to 6th fret for what we would call it a sharp 4, and then you go to 7th fret for a 5, and then you go to 9th fret for a 6, and then you go to 11th fret for a 7, and then you still got the E root at the top, so you're down at the 12. So fret-wise, I'm going open, 2, 4, 6, 7, and then 9, 11, 1, 12. But the notes I'm actually playing, or what I'm thinking of number-wise, is 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 1, 7, 6, 5, sharp 4, 3, 2, 1. Now Now there are also a lot of cool technical things that you could throw in with kind of these ideas for scales, and now we're kind of thinking about what could we make with Lydian as a scale is kind of the idea here, because a lot of people go, oh, scale, play scale, and that's cool, but what you really want to do is try and get use the sound of the scale so that you can know what sounds are where when you want to try and make up something. Or if you get an idea in your head, or if you're listening to the radio and you're going, oh, where is he in the scale? You could kind of count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, and try and figure out where he is in the scale. So if we tried that with Lydian, actually, just to throw a couple technical ideas of how you could say different things, because everything kind of equates to words with talking with the guitar. So a couple technical things you could throw in is kind of just different ways of inflection, I guess. These are like almost like articulation things. But for instance, you could go to 2nd fret on the high E that we're doing with Lydian, and you could try doing that as a pull-off to the open string. So if you know how to do pull-offs, you kind of play in the note and then letting it kind of fall off the string to the open. So it's a very cool idea. And throwing in that low E string, actually, I'm kind of going finger style for this, just for fun. but that can actually make it a lot easier to just take thumb finger to kind of get the bass note in, so you can actually kind of hear the root on everything, which can really help your ear. So I think it's a good ear training thing. So if you go 2nd fret on the high E, you can kind of do that pull off idea. Another way you could play those notes is you could play the open first and kind of do a hammer on back to 2nd fret. So you could play opens together, and then I'm taking my finger and putting it down with enough force to kind of get the sound to carry. So that might be something you want to try and add to this. Like, you could even take Lydian as an idea and then kind of just do pull-offs through it, and that could be part of your vocabulary. It's like, this is something I can say with the guitar. So I can talk in Lydian with pull-offs, which can be kind of a cool thing to try. Or you could try doing hammer-ons that way. Might be something cool. You might want to try it going back to major. Like these same ideas actually can work really well for major scale too. So you could even try the major scale and go back to the regular 4. Or if you want to play around with another sound, actually, if we took the major scale and we did the flat 7 instead, so now you'd be going open to 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, and then 7th fret, and then 9th fret, but then going to 10th fret for the flat 7 and then back to 1. That's something called Lydian, which is still kind of happy, but he's a little bit sad. So you kind of start with the open E, and then you got 2nd fret for the 2, 4th fret for the 3, and then 5th fret for the 4, 7th fret for the 5, and then you got 9th fret for the 6, but then you got 10th fret for the flat 7, and then you're back to root. So we tried that pull-off idea with that. You'd have 2nd fret pull-off, 4th fret pull-off, 5th fret pull off, 7th fret pull off, 9th fret pull off, and then 10th fret, and then back to root. So that could be a cool thing to play around with too. So that could be kind of a cool thing to kind of play around with just things to say too. Something else you could try is slides. So like you could play 2nd fret on the high E, for instance, and kind of slide it to 4th fret. And kind of get a slide sound. So if you keep a little bit of pressure on the string, you can get the sound to kind of carry. So you can even try that same kind of idea with slides. Kind of staying with the mixer Lydian here with the flat 7. Or you could take those pieces of vocabulary, the hammer-ons and the pull-offs and the slides, and kind of put them together. And if we were doing that with the Lydian, we could do hammer-ons, maybe slides. So this can be kind of cool, because what I'm kind of thinking is those numbers, but with those elements of articulation. So I'm still working off of open, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1 is the Lydian. But there are some other sounds too, actually, that we could do. From Lydian, for instance, like if we flatted the third is a very important note because the third determines whether things are happy or sad. Because if you play the flat third instead of the regular third, all of a sudden things sound sad. And then the regular third kind of sounds kind of happy. So it's kind of the difference between a flat third or a third is kind of this smiley face or this frown. Sad, happy. So anyway, so when you're playing around with the scales, if you want things to get sad, you want to start playing the flat third on the third fret instead of your regular third. And actually it can be a really bluesy idea to do both. Like if you did a flat third, two third, and then kind of did the open, that's a very bluesy kind of idea. It's kind of doing that flat third to third. But if we just did just the flat three in a scale, then actually we have something called a minor scale. And actually if we did just the flat three and kind of went back to the major scale and flatted the third, it would actually be something that a lot of times is called melodic minor, where you do the open E, and then we got a second fret on the high E for the two, and then we got third fret for the flat third, but then we still have fifth fret for the four, we still have seventh fret for the fifth, and then we'd have sixth fret for the regular six, and then we have 11th fret for the regular seven, and then we'd be back to root. So it's kind of happy on the upside, but kind of sad on the downside. So you got kind of the regular two, flat three, four, five, and then we got six, seven, one, seven, six, five, four, flat three, two, one, and that's called melodic minor. So that would be kind of a cool thing to kind of play around with too. So that can be kind of a cool thing to play around with too. And then just going over other scales in general, if you flat the third of that, or if we flat the sixth of that, then that's something that we call harmonic minor. So now we got the open E, and then second fret on the high E, and then third fret on the high E for the flat third, fifth fret for the four, seventh fret for the five, and then we got the flat six on the eighth fret on the high E. But then we go all the way to 11 for the regular seven, and then we go back to the root. So that can sound very, the cliche is it sounds Egyptian. but you've got the high E on the 12, and then 11th fret for the 7, but then you've got flat 6 on the high E, and then the 5th on the high E, or 5, and then 4, and then flat 3, and then 2, and then the open E. And that's called harmonic minor. And the coolest part of that actually is that flat 6 to the regular 7. So you can kind of play around with that too, like those same things. You can do hammer-ons, right? So that might be kind of a cool thing to try with harmonic minor, doing the hammer-ons. And then kind of back to 1, so I'm thinking 1, 7, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 2, 1, flat 3, 2, 4, flat 3, 5, 4, flat 6, 5, 7, 1, 7, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 2, 1. So kind of playing around with that scale. Another scale would be if we flatted the 6 and the 7 and the 3, then that's something called natural minor or Aeolian, which is the mode name for him. So then you'd have the open E, and then 2nd fret for the regular 2, 3rd fret for the flat 3, and then you got 5th fret for the 4, and then we got 7th fret on the high E for the 5th, but then we go to the 8th fret for a flat 6, and we go to 10th fret for a flat 7, and then we'd be back to the 1 on the 12th fret. So we got 1, flat 7, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 2, 1, and that's something called natural minor or Aeolian. So that might be something else to kind of play around with, is the natural minor. Might be kind of a cool sound to kind of play around with too. And then from there, actually, there's another minor scale that's kind of a little bit brighter, where another possibility would be to flat the 3 and the 7 and keep the regular 6. So, and that's something called Dorian, where you've got open E, and and then you got second fret on the high E for the 2, and then you got third fret for the flat 3, and then you got fifth fret for the 4, and then you got seventh fret for the 5th. But then we're going to do the regular 6 on the 9th fret, but then we do the flat 7 on the 10, and then we're back to 12th fret on the high E. So we got 1, flat 7, 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 2, 1. So we could play around with Dorian that same way. Flat 3, 2, 1, 2, flat 3, 5, 6, or 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 5, flat 6, 5, or 5, 6, flat 7, 6, 5, 5, 6, flat 7, 2, flat 6, flat 7, 5. That might be another cool thing to kind of try with that. And then from the Dorian, actually the next kind of darker scale, or if we went kind of the dark side of minor, there's a scale called Phrygian. And what Phrygian does is we do the flat 2, the flat 3, the flat 6, and the flat 7. So now we got the open E, but then we go first fret for the flat 2, and then we go to third fret for a flat 3, and then fifth fret for a 4, and then seventh fret for a 5, and then we go to 8th fret for the flat 6, and then 10th fret for the flat 7, and then we go all the way back to 1 to kind of get back to the root on the 12. So we got 1, flat 7, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, flat 2, 1. And that's what kind of characterizes that Phrygian, is that flat 2, that flat. So you got flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1, flat 6, flat 7, 5, flat 6, 4, 5, flat 3, 4, flat 2, flat 3, 1. Kind of the cliche on that is it sounds Spanish, but really it's terrible to have cliches like that, because most of these mode names come from things that Dark Ages scholars gave to Gregorian chant, that they named after Greek things when they'd never heard Greek music before. So it's very bizarre. It just gets passed down. But then another mode of major actually that you could play is something called Locrian, and it's kind of a minor scale too, and it's kind of related to a diminished chord. But with this, we'd actually flat 2, 3, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7. So the only thing that's regular is 4. So now you got open E for the root, and then you got flat 2, which is on the first fret, third fret for the flat 3, fifth fret for the 4. Actually, we'll have the 6th fret for the flat 5, and then we got 8th fret for the flat 6, and then we got 10th fret for the flat 7, and then we're back to the 12th for the root again. So we got 1, flat 7, flat 6, flat 5, which is a very dissonant sound, that flat 5. That's something called the tritone, or the devil's interval, but it's dead center of the between the E's actually is that 6th fret. It just sounds nasty. Actually, all the 7 chords, dominant 7 chords that you play actually have that in it, so you can't play blues without playing the tritone. And then we're back to 4, or the 4 on the 5th fret, and then 3rd fret for the flat 3, and then 1st fret for the flat 2, and then we're back to the open E for the root. So we got 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1, flat 6, flat 7, flat 5, 4, flat 3, flat 2, open E. And with all these kind of, I'm trying to kind of sing those notes that I'm playing to kind of help internalize those. And with talking with the guitar, that can be a really good idea. Actually, a practice technique of talking to yourself can actually be very, very helpful to help you reinforce things, because you hear yourself say it. When you say it, it's practicing the thought that is it. So the more you talk to yourself, actually, the more I think that can kind of help. So we're going to play around with Locrian a little bit that way. We got the open, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 4, flat 3, flat 2, open, 1, flat 7, flat 6, flat 5, flat 6, 4, flat 5, flat 3, 4, flat 2, open. So just as an example, what we were talking about Frere Jacques earlier, right? We had the 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 5, 7, 1, 1, 7, 1. One cool idea you could do is, like, once you kind of get Frere Jacques down, is then you could try going through these other scales, but do Frere Jacques. So for instance, if we tried Frere Jacques with Lydian, all the 4s we would sharp. So if we tried it that way, so we got 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, but then we got 3 sharp 4, 5, 3 sharp 4, 5, 5, 6, 5 sharp 4, 3, open, 5, 6, 5 sharp 4, 3, open, open, 7, open. Or open 5, open, sorry, 7th fret and 5th of the scale. But then if we tried that with Mixolydian, then there actually wouldn't be a difference because we don't actually have a 7. So we would actually go back to the major if we're doing Mixolydian. That 1, open 1, 2, oh, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 1, 7, or 5, 1, 1, 5, 1. So anyway, that could be another thing to kind of play around with. And if we did Frere Jacques with the minor, like with our flat 3, kind of a melodic minor idea, then we'd have 1, 2, flat 3, 1, 1, 2, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 5, 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 1. So it'd be a sad Frere Jacques. And then if we tried that with our harmonic minor, actually, so now we'd be flatting the 6, or this could be you could think about this as natural minor too, because there's not a 7 to kind of make a difference between them. So then you have open 2, flat 3, 1, 1, 2, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 3, 4, 5, 5, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 5, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 1. So it's very sad, even sadder Frere Jacques. And then if we tried that with Phrygian, where we'd have the flat 2, and the flat 3, and the flat 6, and the flat 7, what the 7 won't matter in this melody, then we'd have 1, flat 2, flat 3, 1, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 3, 4, 5, 5, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 5, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 1. And then if we tried that with our Locrian, right, so that now we'd be doing flat 5s, and this would be really nasty and messed up. So we'd have open, flat 2, flat 3, 1, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 5, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 5, flat 6, flat 5, 4, flat 3, 1, flat 5, flat 6, flat 5, 4, flat 3, 1, 1, flat 5, 1, 1, flat 5, 1. So that'd be kind of messed up. Another thing you may want to play around with is actually something else you could experiment with, is working chord shapes with the guitar, kind of trying to talk with notes that are part of a chord. And there are a couple different chords that actually, if we, for instance, if we were doing an E major chord, or if you know E major, we'll walk through it really quick. You got first finger on the G string on the 1st fret, second finger on the A string on the 2nd fret, and third finger on the D string on the 2nd fret. And if you strum all the strings with that, that's something called E major, and it sounds really, really happy. But the reason why it sounds really, really heavy is because you're playing something called the root and the 3rd and the 5th of a chord. And the 3 notes that we're actually playing in this chord are E's and G sharps and B's. So if we did those on that one E string, we'd have the open, and then we'd have 4th fret on the high E for the 3rd, and we have 7th fret on the high E for the 5th, which is the B note. So we got E, G sharp, B, which makes that chord. But we could take those 3 notes, the 1, 3, and the 5, as kind of notes to try and say stuff with too. So we could even isolate just those 3 notes And if we went to 12th fret, then we'd have another E note. So E, 1, 1, 5, 3, 1, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3, 5, 1, 1, 1. So that could be kind of a cool thing to try too. Now we were talking earlier about how the flat 3 makes things sad, and an E minor chord is a very, very sad chord. And the way you play E minor, first finger is going to go to the A string on the 2nd fret, second finger is going to go to the D string on the 2nd fret, and if you strum all those together, that sounds like E minor chord, and it sounds very, very sad. But the 3 notes that we're actually playing in an E minor are E's, G's, and B's. So the only note that's different actually is our 3rd. Instead of being G sharp, now it's a regular G. So if we were measuring that off, we'd have a 1 and a flat 3 and then a 5 for our E minor chord. So we could even take those notes kind of isolated to see what we could say with just minor stuff, or the notes of a minor chord. So we got 1, flat 3, 5, 1, 1, 5, flat 3, 1. Something kind of cool too is to play around with those notes to kind of hear that chord. And then there's another chord type called diminished, and an E diminished chord actually would be a really, really nasty chord, because now we have an E and we have a G note and we would have a B flat note, which sounds very, very nasty together. Actually, any way you kind of play it. But the notes that would make an E diminished chord would be an E note and a flat 3rd, and then we flatten the 5. So instead of a regular B, now you've got a B flat, kind of in that. So we could even isolate those and kind of play around with a diminished idea where we'd have the open E, flat 3, flat 5, 1, flat 5, flat 3, flat 5, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 5, 1, flat 3, or flat 3, flat 5, 1, 1, flat 3, flat 5, 1. So you can even play around with those notes. And there's actually another chord called augmented, which is really kind of crazy too. If you're going to play an augmented chord, or an E augmented, you do first finger on the G on the 1st fret, second finger on the B string on the 1st fret, third finger on the D string on the 2nd fret, and the pinky on the A string on the 3rd fret. And if you strum all those together, it sounds really unresolved. And that's called E augmented, so it's a nasty, nasty sound. And the notes that we're actually playing are the root and the 3 and the sharp 5. So now we're thinking of the flat 6 as a sharp 5. So this is a little weird. So if we isolated those notes, we'd have the E, and then we're playing G sharp, which is 4th fret on the high E for the regular 3rd, and then we'd be going all the way to 8th fret for what we would call a sharp 5, but it's actually our flat 6 or a C note, although some people will call this a B sharp. You let them call that B sharp, which is really a C. So if we could isolate those notes too for the augmented, so we got open and then 4th fret for the 3rd, and then we got 8th fret for the C note, and then we got the high E on the 12. Sharp 5, 3, open, 3, sharp 5, 3, open, 3, sharp 5, good. Kind of an aside, actually all the notes that we're playing in that augmented chord are actually a 3rd away from each other. So actually it's the same distance between all 3 of those notes. And so technically any of them could be a root note, which is kind of a strange musical anomaly, where that E augmented that we were playing actually could be a C augmented, and it could also be a G sharp augmented, or an A flat augmented, if you want to think about it that way. So it's got a couple different names because it's actually equal in distance from the root to the 3rd, and then from the 3rd to the 5th, or the sharp 5, and then from the sharp 5 to the root again. So anyway, that can be a cool thing to kind of play around with too. And then there are also some things called 7th chords. Actually, there are a lot of different chords. You could pretty much put any numbers that you want to together, and we could call it a chord of some sort. But a lot of times after the 5th of the chord is added, then there's something called the 7th. So we're kind of skipping in thirds. Root 1, 2, 3 for the 3rd, 3, 4, 5 for the 5th, 6, 7 for the 7th. So something else you could do is you could try going from the root to the 3rd to the 5th to the major 7 or the regular 7, which would be like the 11th fret, kind of that D sharp. So you got E, G sharp, B, D sharp, which is something called an E major 7. And if we were going to play an E major at 7 in root position, you do first finger on the D string on the first fret, second finger on the G string on the first fret, and third finger on the A string on the third or on the second fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds like E major 7, which sounds really, really groovy. Very, very happy chord here. And what we're playing is the root, the 3, the 5, and the 7 now, kind of all together. So if we isolated those on one string, we have the E and then the G sharp on 4th fret, and we have 7th fret for the B note or the 5th, and then we're going all the way to 11th on the high E for the D sharp, and then we're back to E. So if we played around with those notes, we'd have open 3, 5, major 7, 7, 1, 7, 5, 3, 5, 1, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 5, 7, 5, 3, 5, 1, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 1, 7, 1, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, 7, 5, 7, 1, 7, 5, 3, 1, 1, 5, 3, 1, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 1. So it might be something else to kind of play around with. And then if we altered the 7 of that and made it a flat 7, that's actually the notes that would make an E7 chord or E dominant 7 chord. And the way you play E dominant 7, first finger is going to go to the D string on the first fret, or G string on the first fret. Second finger is going to go to the A string on the second fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds like E dominant 7. It really kind of sounds slightly messed up, and it really wants to go somewhere. But the notes we're playing are E's and G sharps and B's and D's. So now if you're going to isolate those on one string, you have the open E, and then 4th fret for the G sharp, which is the 3rd, and then 7th fret on the high E for the B note, which is the 5th, and then we'd be going to 10th fret on the high E for the flat 7, and then we'd be back to the E on the 12th fret. So we got 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 1. So if we isolated those to kind of play around with them, that could be kind of fun too. Flat 7, 1, flat 7, 5, 3, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 5, 3, 3, flat 7, 3, flat 7, 3, flat 7, 3, flat 7, 5, 3, 1, 1, flat 7, 5, 3, 1, 1. So that might be something else to kind of play around with. And then a minor 7 chord actually is very similar to that. And actually, oh, this one's so easy on the guitar. All you have to do is kind of take the first finger and go to A string on the 2nd fret. And if you strum all the strings with that, that's something called E minor 7. It sounds kind of sad. And the notes that we're actually playing are E's and G's, and then B's and D's. So if we were isolating those on one string, we'd have the E note on open, and we got 3rd fret for the flat 3, and then we got 7th fret for the 5, and then we got the 10th fret for the flat 7, and then we're back to the 12 for the root. So we have open, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 7, flat 3, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 3, 1, 5, flat 3, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, flat 5, flat 7, 5, flat 7. So that may be kind of a cool thing to play around with too. And then if we did an E minor 7 flat 5, that would be another chord that we could kind of play. And this actually on the guitar is going to be a little weird, because flat 5s, oh, who wants to play a flat 5? But one way to play that chord actually would be going to the D string on the 2nd fret, and then taking your 3rd finger, your 2nd finger, and kind of barring over the G, B, and E strings all together. And that's something called a E half diminished 7 or an E minor 7 flat 5. So the notes we're actually playing are we're playing E's and G's and B flats and D's. So now we're flatting our 5. So if we isolate that on one string, we'd have the open E, and then we got 3rd fret on the high E for the flat 3, and then we got 6th fret for our flat 5, and then we got 10th fret for our flat 7, and then we're back to the E on the 12th fret. So we got 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, 1. So if we kind of played around with that a little bit, we got open, flat 3, flat 5, flat 3, flat 5, flat 3, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, 1, flat 7, flat 5, flat 7, flat 5, flat 3, flat 5, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, 1. might be something else to kind of play around with there. And there's actually one other really nasty guitar or chord called E fully diminished 7, which is kind of your other chord, although there are a lot of other variants too. But to play an E fully diminished 7, you actually would do first finger on the D on the 2nd fret, second finger is going to go to the B on the 2nd fret, third finger on the G on the 3rd fret, and the pinky on the high E on the 3rd fret. And if you strum just the top 4 strings with that, that's called E fully diminished 7. And so the notes we're actually playing now is we're playing an E and we're playing a G, and then we're playing the B flat for our 5th, and then we've got a D flat, which is also a C sharp, or our 6th note. So we're isolating those on one string. We're playing the 1 and the flat 3 and the flat 5, and then the 6, which is 9th fret, and then we got high E on the 12th. So we got 1, flat 3, flat 5, 6, 1, 6, flat 5, flat 3, 1. Kind of a cool sound to play around with too. And one other weird thing about the fully diminished chord, kind of like the augmented, is a musical anomaly, because the entire chord is actually built out of flat 3rd shapes. So the distance that we're playing from the open E to the 3rd fret on the high E, kind of skipping over 2 frets to the flat 3rd, is the same distance that we're playing from the 3rd fret to the 6th fret for our flat 5, which is the same distance as our flat 5 going to our 6, right? Going 8th fret on the high E to 9th fret on the high E, the same distance. And then from there, we're kind of going from the 9th fret to the 12th fret, which is also a flat 3rd shape. So we're kind of going from a root to a flat 3, but if this was the root, it'd be a root to a flat 3, but if this was the root, that'd be a root and that's a flat 3, and if that's a root and that's a flat 3. So it's kind of a musical anomaly, because this actually is kind of a rootless chord, where it could be a E fully diminished, or it could be a G fully diminished, or it could be a B flat fully diminished, or it could be a C sharp or a D flat fully diminished. So it's a little weird there. But one cool thing about that with this chord shape though too, is if you move this chord shape by that distance, then you're actually playing what's called the next inversion of the chord. So all these are actually playing the same notes. So I'm kind of setting it up from 2nd fret, but then I'm going to set it up from 5th fret, but then I'm going to set it up from 8th fret, but then I can set it up from 11th fret and actually be playing exactly the same notes every time I move it, which is weird. But then you can isolate the fully diminished to kind of play around with too. So that might be kind of a cool sound to play around with too. But for the most part, the idea of talking with the guitar is getting those sounds kind of embedded in yourself so that you know what those sounds are and where they are on the guitar. And if you think about it from the perspective of the numbers, kind of working the 1, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 6, flat 6, flat 7, 7, 1, then that gives you a name for all these things that you've been hearing your whole life. And once you kind of got those sounds internalized enough, a lot of times you can pick out tunes that you've always wanted to play, even if it's just on one string. And that can be a great idea, is to just take melodies that you know really, really well and try and figure out what the numbers would be to kind of get them, kind of like what we were doing with Frere Jacques, so that you know the difference between a flat 2 and a 2 and a flat 3 and a 3 and a 4 and a flat 5 and a 5 and a flat 6 and a 6 and a flat 7 and a 7. So that way, when you've got a melodic idea inside yourself that comes from your soul, then you can kind of put it down on paper, at least in some form, so that you know what you were playing. And it gives you a sound, or a name for the sound. That's the main thing, it's just getting a name for the sound. So anyway, that's the basics of how you can kind of talk with one string on the guitar. And good luck!